Greetings, adventure. Welcome to the D20 Academy podcast. I'm Shiloh.
I'm Gabriel.
And I'm Ezekiel.
And this is episode 36, World Building, Physical World. Hey you guys, welcome to the first part of a huge series we're going to be doing here on the podcast all about world building. We're going to break down all the separate aspects of world building over the course of a couple different episodes. I don't think we're going to be doing them in a row, but just look out over the next couple months as we'll be dropping these world building episodes. Now, this first one today is going to be focusing on the first step of world building, which is figuring out like the physical world, right? The mapping, the geography, the weather, all of that kind of stuff. So real quick, myself and Zeke are both a little under the weather, so we're like drinking our various liquids to make sure we don't die today.
Nice.
And if there's some coughing, that's why. But other than that, yeah, do you guys have anything else to say before we get into this?
If there's never any episodes, it's because the coughing killed them.
Yes. If the podcast ends, it's because we died. And just a reminder, if you guys want to keep up to date with the podcast and the other stuff we're doing at D20 Academy, you can go ahead and follow us on Instagram at D20_Academy. And if you have any other kind of friends or whatever who are interested in getting into D&D or like role-playing games or storytelling or all that kind of stuff, also if you could let them know about the podcast, it means a lot to us when we can reach new people and help new people. But real quick, I do want to take a note real quick about some of the changes we're making to the podcast. So Gabe here will be joining me as like a regular co-host now instead of just a guest. He's appeared a couple times before on the podcast. So we will be hosting most of the episodes now together. And also we're kind of changing the focus from D20 Academy away from super hyper Dungeons and Dragons focused, all about like teaching and instructive things, helping you guys out with all that kind of stuff, to more of just general tabletop role-playing, storytelling, all that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of cool stuff we can talk about, and just focusing on Dungeons and Dragons was kind of a little limiting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're kind of opening the scope of the podcast a bit, but we will still be doing some of the same stuff like class spotlights and such. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into world building. All right, so let's get into this episode here. So, real quick, I think me and Gabe have kind of worked on a format for these world building episodes. We're kind of going to break down the main topic down into smaller like subtopics.
Yeah, like subgroups within the topic of world building.
Episode, right. So for this one, right, the main topic is like physical world, but we're breaking that down into like mapping, continents, geography, all that kind of stuff.
All things that the physical world contains.
Yeah, and then discuss each one of those. Now, a part of that includes posing a list of questions about each of those. To help you when you're doing your world building. What are some questions you need to answer and think about when you're building your world? And that should be able to help you. Also, world building is a very long, detailed, and tedious process. So we also want to make this as digestible as possible, letting you guys know what you should like prioritize when world building and stuff. So, because there's a lot of detail and intricacies when it comes to all the different... Oh my gosh, I just spilled my tea all over my computer. All the different aspects of world building. It's fine. It's waterproof. That's not true. But anyway, so let's get into our subtopics real quick. So in order, our subtopics today are world theme, mapping, geography, regions, flora and fauna, laws of physics and science, weather, and then cosmology. Such a lot of stuff we're tackling today. I foresee this being over an hour, but
Nice.
We'll see. Okay, so that's kind of the stuff. Oh, I had something I wanted to say, but I guess I forgot about it. Okay. Yeah. I wanted to ask you guys, what is your experience with world building? Like so far?
For me, it's always been a fun thing that I enjoy doing initially, but after I get like bogged down with like all the logistics and specifics of things, it can become like less fun to me. As if I'm doing it for just to do it for the experience, for the enjoyment. It can get a little bit annoying as you're trying to figure out, okay, so if this city is built in the mountains here, then it has to deal with this sort of trade, but then I can't have the same city here to do that, blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah. Why does this exist? Blah 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 blah.
Okay,
blah,
so that actually that reminds me of another question. How many worlds have you started and then not finished? Because I know for me that's a ton. Because we're all kind of storytellers in our own way. Through whatever medium. Oh my! The tea is literally attacking me. It's jumping out of the cup at me. I've done. I write. I like to write a lot. I used to write a lot more, and I'm kind of getting back into it now. But my favorite genres were like sci-fi and fantasy and stuff, so I'd have to always do world building for any of the stories I wanted to tell there, which usually I never really finished or got much done.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can think of several settings I just never finished.
Yeah, and same for you, right, Zeke? Yeah, definitely. Like when we used to work on our fantasy stuff together, we used to lots of world building and stuff. Because it's kind of a crazy thing to tackle, honestly. And I think one thing that kind of connects to, tabletop role-playing games, this episode is not specifically, on tabletop role-playing games, specifically, because I think anyone trying to tell a story in any medium, whether it be, you're writing a script, or you're writing a novel, or you're planning a D&D campaign, if you're doing it in, the fantasy genre or whatever, then you're probably building your own world. So, the things we're talking about today are not, exclusive to just tabletop role-playing, or, D&D, or whatever. Mm-hmm. However, we are kind of focusing on fantasy, primarily. We're not going to be talking about, if you're building a sci-fi world, you need to figure out, all these different, planets
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. That's kind of a whole nother ball game, I think. So, maybe we can do an episode about that.
Yeah, but for right now, we're just focusing on fantasy world
just
building.
one world.
Yeah.
Just one world, not 100 different worlds and planets. But yeah, so I think one thing is new DMs or new game masters, but feel like they have to build their own world. I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but there's this weird stigma that when you're a new DM, you have to build a world from scratch. Maybe that's just from my experience and the people that I've met. It was definitely me when I started. Is that kind of true for you guys as well? Do you think because when you guys both tried DMing once or twice or whatever, didn't you just try to build a world from scratch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks.
Why is I don't know why that is. That's pretty strange to me. Why that's a thing. But also I did that. So I guess it's just it's weird.
I feel like it's just the urge to make the world that you would want
Yeah.
to experience and to play in. But then you just get too caught up in the small things, and it's it's not fun for me anymore.
Or not caught up enough, I guess. Because, if you're a new DM, I think a thing that happens a lot, definitely for new DMs, but probably just a ton of DMs anyway, is, let's just take D&D for an example. You buy 5th edition stuff and you read through it, and it's kind of set in its own world, right? Where these specific monsters exist. With if you read the monster manual, each monster entry has kind of a history of it, and the fact that this monster exists the way it does, right? So in the Forgotten Realms, right, which is kind of the 5th edition setting that they use, basically, this is the way dragons are. In other settings, dragons may be different, but this is the way dragons are in this world. Here's kind of the history of them. They had a war with giants or whatever. I think a lot of people don't go, let me research the Forgotten Realms. I know a lot of people do that, the Sword Coast. And let me, learn about that and then just play in that world. They just, take the Forgotten Realms, stuff, but they kind of make their own world. So, all the monsters that exist in the Forgotten Realms and stuff all exist in their world. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? And, all the history of all the monsters and stuff exists in their world. It's just, their own, though. If that makes sense. That was kind of Machvin Star. Because that was the D&D campaign we finished last year.
It's already last year.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was 2.5 years. But that was different from how I do world building and stuff now. If we just started some new campaigns and stuff. Because I was still learning, we were all still learning how to play the game when we first started that campaign. So it was wild and kind of unrealistic and not super concise and consistent because I was still getting used to all that kind of stuff. Also, I was 14. So, but that's how I did it. I took all the stuff that exists in the Monster Manual and stuff exists in my world. It's my world. And so it's it's the map and stuff is different and everything. But I think it really fleshed out and became more and more my world once we started playing and I started really, caring about it. And you guys left the main, little village or whatever. Okay. We have a lot to talk about, so we should keep going. All right, so starting with the first subtopic, unless you guys have anything else you guys wanted to say kind of about that. Nope, okay.
Yeah, we don't typically talk much. Just here to look at the camera that doesn't exist.
It's not a camera, it's a microphone. Well, I would like to get a camera, though, one of these days. Film these. Okay, so starting with world theme. So let me ask you two guys, what is world theme?
I think it's just the general tone of the world, the general feel that you want to have, and you can pull from, literature. You can pull from any source that you want to pull. Like, oh, I like this aspect of, say, like Harry Potter. Or, oh, I like the way that magic works, or perhaps I like the way that
I don't, but
the
sorry.
society is.
Sure.
You can pull things from that. And you want to. World theme's about establishing a central theme for the world so you can stay consistent to that theme and make the world feel more real. Because it doesn't make sense necessarily for you to have a world with a theme that's like, oh, I want the theme to be really dark and gritty, but also half the players are unicorns with rainbows.
That's my
flowing in their
favorite player
hair.
race,
Yes.
honestly. I don't know why that's not canon yet. A unicorn player race. That's a little confusing to me, but so Zeke, I know you don't have tons and tons of experience of world building. I mean, not any of us really have a ton of that. But if you would start building a world, what do you kind of start with?
Well, usually I try to set up an idea and a tone, and then from there I'll start building the actual physical world, and then start thinking about how people interact and how the roadmaps and talents should be set up. Because that kind of gives you an idea about how struggles and wars start out and end up, and how the territory is divided, and what places are safe and what's not. So you can really get your theme and your tone down to put your players in a world that you have a good amount of control over, rather than just a world they can do absolutely anything that they want in.
Yeah. I think just the general feel, mood, tone of the world, I think is pretty important. And I think that takes many forms, because one thing is if you really take that and really be okay, that's how if you really focus in on that, then something comes out what's that world called? I want to say Ravenloft, but I'm not sure if that's actually what the world is called. Well, anyway, it's one of the D&D official settings. There's Forgotten Realms, Eberron. I think it's called Ravenloft. I'm gonna look that up here. But basically, that's a world. Yes, it is. Okay, so Ravenloft is one of the D&D worlds where it's super dark, vampires, zombies, werewolves. Everyone lives in fear. Big castles and counts and bats everywhere. That's taking what's the general feel, tone, mood of it, and being this is the mood. There's a very obvious tone. There's you're very limited in the amount of stories you can tell and the amount of games you can run in that kind of world. That's not a bad thing necessarily. I think it's kind of a good thing actually, because everywhere your characters look, there's a reminder of the feel of the campaign. That'd be a campaign that's focused on horror, mystery. Yeah. That kind
I think
of
a good way of thinking about world theme is thinking about architecture. If an architect says, oh, I'm going to make a building, and I kind of want it to be, it looked like Victorian era or something. So have that set in mind, they start building their, whatever it is they're building, but they can also deviate from that path a bit, but still have that general central theme to give the general central feel of the building that he's building.
Yeah. So Ravenloft is kind of one of those really toned in, very obvious theme. And then Forgotten Realms is much more zoned out. The mood was just, the tone is just kind of high fantasy, adventures, big monsters, and big nations and armies. Just, kind of classic Middle-earthy, I would say, high fantasy thing. That's okay, too. That's also fine.
Yeah, your theme doesn't have to be super specific.
Yeah.
But also doesn't have to be super broad. You can make it anywhere along that scale.
The more vague or open, I guess, your world theme is, the bigger the spaces for the amount of stories you can tell in that world, I think. So I think that's kind of directly proportional So like the more intense and obvious your theme is, the less variety, I should say, not amount, the less variety of stories and games you can play in that. But once again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, if your group is like all like super into like vampires and Dracula and all that, and Transylvania, all that kind of stuff, they're like playing in Ravenloft with the tone of it being like mystery and horror. That's cool. And like people, like everyone will be okay with it. Like that'll be as much fun as people who are just kind of like, we're here for D&D just to kind of just like have fun, and it's more vague. Not everyone is like super sure of like the kind of really tone. They're just like, we just want to kill stuff and feel cool. Then like Forgotten Realms, that's like the kind of stuff for that. It can be much more vague, and not everyone has to be on the super same page. If that makes sense. So yeah, questions to ask yourself about world theme. What is the kind of game you're trying to run? If you're world building for a tabletop role playing game, what is the kind of game you're trying to run? What kind of story are you trying to tell? This is for whether you're writing a novel, building a campaign, whatever it is. What kind of story are you trying to tell, or what kind of stories are you trying to tell?
And then last, like, where do you draw your inspiration from? Like, oh, I'm gonna pick this part from that fantasy universe I know, this part from this story. You just want to figure out where you want to draw inspiration from for this theme. Yeah.
So if you're like more high fantasy stuff, maybe you're pulling inspiration from Forgotten Realms or Middle Earth or whatever, or you're like kind of like grittier, dark war themes. Maybe you're pulling it from like Westeros or you know. So yeah, I think being able to kind of give your worlds references to other like pop culture worlds, I think, is also will help you figure out kind of like the feel and theme.
And also your players or your audience will like be like, oh, I kind of recognize like that feel. It's something that they know, it's something familiar to them. They can then change from that. But it's just a nice like anchor point to be like, oh, I know that.
Yeah. Zeke, any other thoughts?
No, you guys summed it up pretty well.
All right. Next, we have mapping, which is a pretty big topic. Would you say like that mapping is kind of the next piece?
Yeah.
Yeah, because for me, it's like, I kind of have my world theme or whatever. But when I have a visual representation, all the ideas start flowing.
Absolutely, yeah.
To me.
For me, I basically like never do mapping. It's just something that, for me, in my stories and the things that I like to world build, it's not the most important thing to me, but I think it's really important in general. It's something that I should do more of. It's just something, it's not necessarily, for me, the part that I enjoy the most. But I think it's still necessary to do.
What I think is cool now is that you don't have to be a really good artist or be good at math to be able to, draw out a cool map. Because there's so many cool online resources and stuff that can do that. There's literally like map generators, like it just generates a random map and stuff. And like that's cool. Like just take that and make that your world. Or like there's stuff like Incarnate. Incarnate.com with a K instead of a C is like a free map building resource. You can put the landmass, you can carve it out, and then you like can put all the mountains and cities and stuff all around it. And you don't need to be good at drawing for that. You just need to be able to use a mouse. So I think that's really cool. I think that's really cool. Because it used to be like
we have those resources.
Yeah, because mapping is kind of a big thing. Like that's pretty hard. I've only drawn one map by hand on paper, which was the map for the Monkman Star, the campaign we played recently, and I like it a lot. I think it looks really cool. I think it looks really nice, but I'm scared I will never be able to recreate it. So like all my other maps now have been from online things. So the first point we have here is, what is your world's place in the larger universe? This is kind of a deeper thing. Because, like, some stories and stuff, it literally doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all, yeah.
Yeah. But, also, I feel like it is kind of important to just have, like, a general idea. Like, is it a part of, like, a multiverse? Are there other planes or planets? Like, the most D&D worlds... Okay, I'm confused about D&D. You know how they have, like... In D&D, there's, like, a multiverse. There's, like, the plane of Limbo, the elemental plane of fire... Feywild, planes you can go to, literal other worlds. That like, and then there's like a map of like how they border the material plane. Oh yeah, and then there's like what is it called? Not the phantasmal plane.
The
astral. No. Astral is like nothingness. Is like what are you? When like you like go like invisible, not really, but like then you can float through stuff. What is that called? I haven't played D&D in so
I
long.
thought it was Astral Plane. Wasn't Astral Plane the one that overlaps everything?
No, I think that's like just crazy.
You spelled plane wrong.
Yeah, I think that's just like crazy space stuff. Like Astral Plane's like in between everything else. Yeah. That's like the Astral Sea and all that kind of stuff. Ethereal.
Ah!
The ethereal plane. Yeah.
There we go.
So like there's in D&D, I'm a little confused. Is that just the Forgotten Realms, or is that like just all D&D worlds?
I honestly don't know, because there's like spells and things that reference it, so it kind of like has to, if you're playing with those spells and abilities.
Oh yeah. There are abilities and spells that like really have to do with the planes.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing. I don't think a ton of people even care about that. I think most D&D campaigns, like, you're not gonna go to the Feywild and stuff ever.
Most don't reach a level where they have access to those
that's
things.
true. But like, you know, in Critical Role they did it. They went to the Feywild.
Yeah, they just plane shift to the Feywild.
I think that's it. They went to Limbo or something. The Plane of Chaos or something. But yeah, like, are there other like?
They went to a fire plane. Plane of fire.
Oh, the elemental plane of fire. Yeah. So, you know, are there like those same like D&D, like the planes bordering this thing and like the elemental planes in the four corners of the material plane? And is there like an ethereal plane that's like juxtaposed over your plane, your material plane? It's pretty deep stuff. I still don't really get it. There's a whole chunk of the Dungeon Master's Guide on it.
Again, like, this part like isn't necessarily something that you need to have established for the world. Yeah. It's just something like, if your theme calls for it, you want to have this information. Like, if your theme has anything to do with, you know, like, going, like, massive battles, heavenly battles, things like that, you're going to want to establish other planes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. Because, like, if you have, like, a huge pantheon of gods, where do they live? And, like, can you go visit them and
they have domains.
Yeah, that are the other planes and stuff. Okay, another point in this kind of note about the place in the larger universe is, like, is your world the whole world, or is it, like, a little bit of the world? For example, Middle-earth is just a small section of the whole world. But, like, Middle-earth within itself is considered, like, its own world and stuff. But it's like a little part on one of like two massive continents. I don't know if you knew that. I only learned that like a year ago or so. But anyway, same with in Pathfinder. In Pathfinder, at least for the second edition,
the playable area is just like a small point between two of the continents.
Yeah, there's like 7 continents, and the playable area, the place that they detail, is like a small where 2 continents connect.
And it's all these different regions, and within those regions, there's so many things, but it's still just
it is like a whole world, though, that you can totally explore and have a ton of fun, and you won't get bored of it. Or
it's depth and variety, but it's still just a small part. So you have to figure out, like, is my playable area or the setting for where I'm going to be writing, is it going to be like a small part of something bigger, or is this going to be all that there is?
Like the whole planet, like Earth. Yeah, like it's the whole thing. I think for someone who doesn't, like, have a ton of time and stuff, or is not super, like, experienced in, like, always into world building, honestly, having the little region, and just making that your whole world, I think that's fine.
Yeah. You don't need to go big.
Because when you go big, that opens, like, then you have to do what you just did 50 times for all the other, like, it's pretty crazy. But I think you want to make sure, even if you do have, like, a little region or whatever, is it, does it have enough in it? Or is it big enough to be able to hold the kind of story you want to tell and stuff? You know, I think that's also important. And any other notes on the place in the larger universe? Don't push my table over, please. Okay. Planet classification. Is your is your world a planet? Like Earth? Is it a moon? Is it a star? Is it something?
How would you
live on a star?
It's fantasy.
It's fantasy.
Anything
possible. Is it something different altogether? But that what you just said. Is it flat? Is it a sphere? Now, once again, if you kind of take like a Middle-earth approach, a little zoom in on a little region, it doesn't matter. Because the world is so big compared to this thing, it literally doesn't matter if that's a globe or not. But, you know, if you're going to be making a whole world with multiple continents, is that the whole world? Is it a sphere? Like Earth? Like, is it flat? Is it, like, you know, I think choosing, like, oh, the world's flat. That's cool. But, like, why? Like, what's the point of that?
What's the point of it?
Yeah.
And then you always have like that one player that's like, okay, we sailed to the
We sailed to the but like, so me and Zeke built. So okay, little history lesson.
Yeah.
A long time ago, many years ago.
407.
Yeah. When we were first introduced to tabletop role-playing games, which was D&D 4th edition,
Yeah.
I believe, and we played it a little bit, and we're like, this is cool, but you know what would be better if we made it. So then we made our own game, our own tabletop role-playing game. Looking back on it, it's very mechanically inconsistent and not a good game. But it was very fun for us when we played it, so like that's good, at least, you know. It served the purpose. But that world, called Mystic or something, was flat. Mm-hmm. And water came from the center. There was like a pool in the center of the world that all the water streamed out of and then flowed off the edge, but it was like a never-ending pool.
Yeah.
Because
That's pretty dope, though.
You have to think about it. Like, if your world is flat and there's water going off the edge, it's never circling back around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless it is. But then also underneath it was another world, but like the gravity was flipped. That was the underworld.
Yeah.
Was the bottom side of that coin. So like that was cool. We made the world flat, but like it served a cool purpose. And like yeah, like if you went through one of the passages, you go underground, and then gravity flips for you, and you land. Like, because then it's... Anyway, I don't want to get into it. But, you know, that was a flat Earth. that was a flat world. So, yeah, you know, I think that's something to think about as well. Any other notes on that? Okay, cool.
Oh. Yeah, I forgot, like... You know, I kind of just lost my train of thought.
All right.
It's not very important.
All right, it's fine if it comes back to you. Next, size and scale.
It matters.
Size matters in world building. Mm-hmm. This is something I struggle with, as you guys know, as people who've played in worlds I have ran. I'm horrible at math. That's not true, actually. I'm not actually horrible at math.
You're horrible at estimating size.
I'm really bad at estimating it. If I go to like a conference and there's a room, and you were like, "Are there 500 people in here or 1,000?" I would be like, "I have no idea." If you're like, "We have like, you know, how far away is this place from this place?" I'd be like, "I have no idea." I didn't realize how small an acre was till like recently. I thought an acre was huge. Yeah. Because I've only ever heard of acres in the instance where like someone has a big farm and like it's like 20 acres. Mm-hmm. And when you're on that farm, it looks big because there's nothing on it or anything. But then I looked up a square mile and it's like a ton of acres.
Yeah.
And
acres aren't big.
I was like, whoa, acres aren't big. I'm confused now. But just like miles and I'm really bad at distance and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, like just recently, he accidentally made
oh my God.
a library that he said, though he didn't think about it, was 400 square miles.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, it's like 20 miles long by 20 miles wide. And the rest of the table were just like, wow, we're going to be in this library for years.
We were all panicking because we had to search it for an object.
Yeah.
A 400 square mile library.
Yeah, they had to search this massive ancient Jedi library for these artifacts.
And then I nearly had a heart attack when we found out there was another level beneath this.
Yeah.
Okay, it didn't span the whole library.
That was just for a couple buildings had a basement. Yeah, I'm bad at estimating that kind of stuff. And also, when we were playing on Unlock Fin Star, the passage of time of travel time would be like, sometimes it would be like a couple hours, sometimes it would be a couple days.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how big my world was. So, get this down early, because this is very important. It's size. You guys talk about this, because this gives me a headache. I hate size and scale.
Well, yeah. I think some of the most important parts when you're figuring out the size of your world is when you take the playable area, figure out how exactly long and tall it is, because that'll give you a general idea of how long it takes to cross the world. And once you have that figured out, it's a lot easier to compartmentalize the distance between man-made structure to man-made structure. Because once you know, oh, my world is X amount of miles long, so that takes X amount of days, going from this point to this point is about, a half of my world, so it only takes this long to get there. So once you kind of figure out
Yeah.
the general scale of the length and width of your world, it becomes a lot easier to calculate everything in between just on the fly.
You are gonna have to do math.
Yeah.
No matter
Some
what.
math, yeah.
What is cool, going back to those online resources and things, a lot of them you can put a grid over top your world, and then that will help you a lot. Because then you figure out the scale of, what the grid means, like the scale of the distance between each thing. Or
You also want to keep in mind when you're deciding the size and scale of your world, like how much you want to put into it. You might be like
Yes.
accidentally like overstuffing your world, or maybe there's just a ton of empty space that you have nothing
yeah,
to do for.
that's true. The bigger you make the world, the more work you have to do.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. For example, the world in Pathfinder, I believe it's called the Inner Sea,
Yes.
which is, once again, just this little playable region within the big continents. That world is, even that little Inner Sea thing, is big. It's pretty big.
Just think like Upper Africa, Europe into like
Yeah,
Middle East.
it's
like,
pretty big. So, because of that, it's a lot of detail. There's a lot of different places and regions and stuff because it's really big. So, yeah, I think that's, the bigger you make it, the more work you have to do. Unless you're like, it's a desert world. There's 5 cities. It's really big, and there's 5 cities. Everything else is desert. I don't have to do any work. Which,
the whole world.
Tatooine?
I was gonna say the whole world is lava. That's it. Okay.
Is it
Episode
Mos
3.
Eisley?
Huh?
Is Mos Eisley? Mos Eisley? What is it?
What
The
do you mean?
the place in Tatooine where they meet Han Solo.
Oh yeah, Mos Eisley.
Mos Eisley, yeah. It's like that.
Oh,
little,
yeah, of
that's like
course.
that town. That's it. Like that's all that you have on Tatooine.
What's on Mustafar? Like, Just
Mustafar
like-
is cool.
Yeah.
I think it's one of. Okay, maybe we should just do a whole episode of us just like talking about cool stuff. Like, what's cool?
do you think George Lucas knows that like planets can exist with more than one biome? 'Cause I'm not sure.
Yeah,
if he
yeah, yeah,
does.
yeah, yeah. That's what I. Okay, here's the thing though. Real quick, talking to sci-fi. Yes, that is kind of a joke, but also that's how I would do it. That's how I think you should do it. Because you have to treat. There's no way you can build like 100 Earths and go into that much detail. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Heck no. Don't do that. I'm telling you right now, don't do that. If you love yourself. Or even remotely like yourself.
I was gonna say like, oh, I can't
Because-
see out.
I think when you're doing sci-fi, you kind of have to treat it... Well, sci-fi is a pretty big genre. I'm going to say, like, space opera-y. More Star Wars kind of thing. You have to treat... I think you treat it like a world, and the planets are kind of like the different regions. The different, like, biomes and stuff. And you'll only have to give one a couple, like, cities or, like, notable locations. Because they're huge. They're literal planets. And so having to go into, like, the detail of it... So, yeah, it is a joke that, like, every planet is, like, a single biome. Like, this is all a desert. This is all a jungle. This is a big ocean. But also, like, that kind of helps, I think.
Yeah.
Being able to... Because then if you make everyone as detailed and, various and with all the different kind of biomes, then, like, that's so confusing and a lot of work for you.
It also, yeah, it can blend together a lot. But like in Star Wars, I think it is wise that they did like what you're saying. If each planet like, has their own unique biome, like this is all that there is. It helps you distinguish between the different worlds and the settings,
Yeah.
so you know where you are.
And it's just... Because it's like... If you're in, like, a fantasy world, it's like... Oh, we want to go sailing. Let's go to the ocean region of the fantasy world. Like, where the islands and stuff. And it's like... In Star Wars, or like in a sci-fi thing, it's like... We want to go sailing. Let's go to the ocean world for that kind of adventure. Because it just kind of acts as those... We don't need to talk about sci-fi anymore. All right. Okay, so yeah, size and scale. Important.
Yes.
Yep. So keep in mind, you don't want to make it too big because you have to do a ton of work. Too small, you'll run out of things. Your players will like have seen the whole world, and it's like, ooh, we know everything now, I guess. Because there were definitely like half of Mockman Star you guys never went to. That's a lie. You guys went to a lot of places, but maybe like a fourth. There's a lot of stuff you didn't go do, but that's fine because I didn't have anything in those areas. Okay, one thing: if you're doing it for a tabletop RPG, this is what I did, and there's not too much of a problem. You don't have to build all of it and then start your campaign. You should do more than I did at the beginning. But even so, I like have a region, I have a basic description of like what it is, but I'm not gonna detail the towns and stuff in there until the PCs are like, let's go to that region. Then I detail that, because there's no point for me, you know, doing that right now. You know, you have not a lot of time when you're planning every week, or you know, how often you meet, and you need to prioritize your planning time. So you want to make sure you're spending world building parts on stuff that's relevant that your PCs will like go to soon, or that they're in now.
Yeah. This also just applies to writing in general. If you're writing a story that's based like in a small city, you don't necessarily have to write the whole entire multiverse.
Yeah.
Just for that small city to work.
Unless you're writing a 10-part series.
Yes. If you're Brandon
Sanderson, then that's
like,
okay.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Why are you listening to us?
Yeah, go listen. He has probably way better work building advice than us. No, please stay. Okay. No, so this note, I have a note here that just says, just mapping in general. Because I think there's, oh my gosh, we need to hurry up. We're already 30 minutes in. So this is just in reference to kind of land masses, continents, islands, rivers, seas, bodies of water, within land masses. Because that's kind of the main mapping stuff. We're going to get into geography and mountains and all that kind of stuff in a second. But the main, like, land masses and islands, what are your thoughts on that? Any, like, tips on, like, creating that or, like, anything?
I think the main thing you should figure out is how much land do I want to have, how much water do I want to have, what separates these different areas, which, you know, also keep in mind when you're doing just size and scale, like, oh, do I want to have just like a small world where everyone's close together and all the regions are all close together, or do I want to have it more split up where it's harder to go to the other regions and it's a trek to get there?
Yeah. Z?
I think in terms of landmarks and landmasses, a very important part of it is make it look natural and make it serve a purpose. If you're just putting something somewhere to have it there, and it's not really going to serve a purpose, then you should probably spend your time doing something else. But if it's going to be in a certain place to serve a purpose, like to maybe a river that separates two towns, or it's a large lake in the middle of the continent that could house a kraken or something, then it's definitely worth your time to spend it on. But if you're just adding details in for the sake of adding details, it's not really good use of your time because you can always fill that in later.
Okay, but here's the conundrum of making a map. Is mapping is one of the first things you want to do. A lot of things in your world are based off of, you know, the map and the geography and all this kind of thing. But also, it's a little hard to map without also having... This is just a world building problem in general. Which is, you need something to work on this, but you can't work on this until you work on that. So you kind of have to do two things at the same time and stuff, a little bit. When I was making Mockman Star, I was kind of just like drawing shapes and stuff, just like creating like a map looking landmass thing. So it's a little different, you know, like doing it based off of a thing, or like, because when I built the world and then like I kind of had two separate continents that were kind of split in the middle, and then that gave me an idea of like now there's kind of two different like nations or whatever. So, you know,
Then we got way more complicated than that.
yeah. But you know what I mean? It's kind of a thing where like, you know, you do want to have your land masses and things like have a purpose and stuff, but also they can inspire the purpose. So you can, you know, you can base it off of that.
Yeah.
I think a lot depends on the kind of world builder you are, whether you are the kind of person to premeditate everything you're going to be doing, or the one that really does it more on the fly, where you start drawing or you start creating and writing and you get ideas for things that then influence what you previously did or not. I think that definitely influences the way that you will end up creating your map and later on the rest of your world.
Good?
Yep. I just want to go back to like what Zeke was saying earlier about like make it look real. Don't draw a map that looks like it's a rectangle. Just a rectangle. That's it. That's the world.
Yeah.
I mean,
at that point, why even draw it?
I think, yeah, you know, you don't have to get too deep into like the sciences of it. Because once again, this is a fantasy world. Yeah. But like, you know, how do land masses get formed in real life? You know what I mean? And thinking about that kind of stuff also. You know, so for example, we live in Hawaii, and Hawaii is a chain of islands, but there's a rhyme and reason to the size of them, all that kind of stuff, and why they're in this shape. Yeah. Is because there is a volcano, or there's something underneath.
A hotspot.
Yeah, a hotspot. Yeah. And as we're the tectonic plates are, I'm not a big science person, but like as they're shifting, the islands.
That's your favorite subject.
The islands that were getting formed are moving away, so they're no longer being made by the hotspot, and now a new one is being made. So in the shape that the things are moving in, that's how the islands were formed. Is that true? I think that's true.
Yeah, the way the tectonic plates shift.
Yeah.
Also, that just sounds like a dope story for how the world was built.
Yeah, so, you can totally just bypass the science of it and just make it like a cool looking world and stuff. That's totally fine. No one was gonna... Hopefully none of your players will be like, wait a minute, this doesn't make scientific sense. It's like, bro, you're literally writing on the back of a dragon.
Just make a world that looks interesting and has a reason to why you put things there.
I think something about the shape, like, if you make it kind of looking like a... Oh, yeah, we gotta move forward, but real quick. If you make it like kind of like the shape of like a laying down body, like, is it like the back of a titan who fell into the ocean? You know what I mean? I'd like play around with cool shapes. That's okay. That's literally had no informative. All right. Geography. What are you guys' notes on landscapes, mountain ranges, rivers, forests, deserts?
Main thing to keep in mind is how accessible you want your world to be, I think.
Yeah.
The less accessible you want it to be, the more of these things that you add. The more mountain ranges that you add for them to traverse, more, bodies of water for them to cross, forests to navigate through, deserts to trek across, The more diverse and the more difficult you want it for them to be able to travel, the more of these things that you add.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I think that adding on to that, climate should also be a part of that, because a lot of times the climate will dictate geography and geography dictates climate in a little kind of weird paradox. And that also definitely lends itself to how accessible your world is. So that's another thing to keep in mind when planning out geography.
I think I'm just looking at my massive Middle-earth map on my wall, but I think Middle-earth is a really good example of what Gabe was saying, which is, if you think about, like, it depends on how much you know about the story of Lord of the Rings, but the journey of the ring and, like, all the battles and stuff that took place, the mountains were a really big part of that.
Yeah.
The route the Fellowship took from the Shire to Mordor was impacted a lot by the terrain. They can't go in a straight shot. They couldn't go in a straight shot.
They even lost the main character because of the choices made.
Yeah, because they had to go through the mines and stuff going over the mountains. So yeah, I think that's true. If it serves, the purpose of like your story or whatever, or like Rohan and Gondor are separated by a mountain range. That's why like they're different and that's why they're not clashing or anything, because it's very hard for them to even fight. The border they share is a mountain range, which is hard to traverse. So. Yeah, based on what you were thinking, I think that's important. And I think kind of harkening back to like your world theme, is how much of your world is forested, and has a desert, and has mountains.
Another thing to keep in mind when you're talking about the landscape of your world is, okay, if I put a mountain range here, how would the population of the world respond to that? What would happen in the world if I put a mountain here, if I put a river there,
But that, it's just, there's this thing about world building is like, how much detail do you go? How much do you spend on certain things? How much time do you spend on certain things? You know what I mean? I think, in general, the landscape isn't, like, super, super, super crazy, like, based on science, and think about the impact and stuff. I think you should think about, like, putting a mountain range here, kind of for a purpose or whatever. And, having a good amount of forests and lakes and stuff. But just, like, putting that stuff on your map. Sometimes you don't always, depending on like how much time you have and stuff to world build, have to have like a rhyme and reason.
Yeah.
To that.
I'm just adding it to have diversity to your world.
Yeah. So and then when you get like, if you have a lot of time, or when you get crazier about it, or you have more time, or something like that. But when Zeke was talking about climate, I just didn't talk about that. You're not gonna have a desert in a cold climate or whatever. And
I mean, you could.
Okay. But and you're not going to have. You need to think about, like, if it's, how varied is the climate? Because on Earth, right, it's cold in a place and hot in another place. But those are very far apart. So in your world, if you're going to have a place that's cold and another place that's kind of hot, make sure it's a distance between them that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Makes sense for your world.
Unless it's, like, magical or whatever.
Unless it's magical.
In which case, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Speed round. Next time. Regions. Zeke, notes on regions?
I mean...
Okay, let me give some prompts real quick. Something to think about is your world separated geographically or politically? I think that's pretty important.
I think they often work hand in hand.
Like Gondor and Rohan are not the same nation because there's a mountain in between them.
Well, I was about to go to a whole history lesson of the
Yeah.
well, actually, the reason why
Here's something to think about that I don't think about when I world build enough. Why are the regional borders where they are? Some it's like, there's a river there. There's a mountain there. But if you think about, like, the world, Africa, why are the countries that size and have their borders there? U.S., why are the states that size with their borders there? This is kind of a deep question, I feel like.
Yeah, there's a lot to go into with that one. There's so many reasons why you could make this region here and that region there and what separates them. But it's just something to keep in mind. A good thing to keep in mind when you're making the regions. Why are they different regions?
Yeah.
Why are they there? Why are they separate?
Oh yeah, one thing is you may want to hold off on political regions till you figure out your world's like nations and cultures and stuff. But you could also just split your world into geographical regions, like Middle Earth. I think I don't actually know if it's split into geographical regions, but I think it is.
For the most part.
Yeah. Okay. Flora and fauna. Starting with plant life. Zeke, I know you're a huge botanist. No, do you think about plants a lot in world building or like stuff? Because I don't.
Yeah, no, not really. Unless it's important to the region that I'm going to be setting it up in, no. Not at all.
I'll think about, like special plants. If there are any special plants, like, oh, perhaps I want to have this special type of tree that does this. Then that's the kind of thing that I'll plan. I won't necessarily plan out, like, okay, this species of grass and this.
Yeah, you definitely don't have to.
Which is
like,
a cousin to this.
If you love that kind of stuff, knock yourself out.
Do it.
But, like, for me, if I'm, like, designing like an RPG world or whatever, I might be like, they're in a city right now, and I want to have this kind of mission. And there's a forest nearby, so they get the local apothecary's like, hey, I'll pay you if you go to this forest and get me the blank root and I'll pay you. Like, that's a little adventure. And then I could just make up the plant right there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, serving your purpose and stuff. But, so I don't think you have to spend a lot of time on plant life unless you want to. I think what that can help with the immersion is thinking a little bit about it. And, like, why are they growing there? You know what I mean? Like, why is that plant growing in that place?
It can be a good thing for Hook, like, for when you're trying to build a culture, like, why is this forest here? Oh, did someone, like started, like, a nursery here, like a plant nursery here, and perhaps it grew into something, or perhaps this is something that this culture cultivates, or
has to do with the climate.
Yeah.
As Zeke was saying.
So necessarily, as we're saying, you don't have to get super scientific about it, but it's just a nice thing to keep in mind so you can help use it to design other parts of your world, design the cultures and economy and things like that.
I know we have to move through this, but real quick, in Death Stranding, the plant life doesn't like matter like in the story or whatever, but as you're walking through like the plant life of like how it's like mossy and whatever, is because of the thing of how the system of the rain turns ages stuff, so things can't grow. The only things that can grow are temporarily living plants and stuff, so that's why all the plant life and stuff is like that, like the grass and moss. Which I think is kind of cool. Because you're basing that now off of, like, why is it like this? You know what I mean? Okay, real quick. Okay, next. Wildlife. I think much more about wildlife than I do nature. Plant life. Zeke, notes on wildlife.
Yeah, I think wildlife is something that is a lot more important to think about because depending on the depth of what you're going to be doing, it can relate to food, it can relate to mounts, it can relate to threats and help. So it's definitely something to keep in mind when building your world and when setting up your geography and your climates and regions, and it's definitely something that you can go a lot more in depth with and you can do a lot more with because of how important it can be.
Yeah. Another note would be having wildlife can help just be another thing to help immerse your players and immerse your audience. Between like, there's a difference between like walking in a forest and you hear nothing. and you're walking in the forest, and you hear the twittering of the birds, and you see
Yeah.
a stag off behind some
Yeah.
trees in front of you.
Yeah. Also, just you want to figure out like specifying it. Like, do you just have like earth animals, or do you
Yeah.
have like beasts, or do you have like mythical monsters? Because then you have to like, okay, dragons exist. Let's say like in the mountainous regions. So take the animals in the mountainous regions like goats and not leopards, cougars. I'm an idiot. You know the kind of animals that live in there.
Yeah.
Now, how does the dragon factor into how they live in like their food chain? But once again, that's also kind of that's getting deeper. If you want to spend more time on that, that's kind of deeper stuff. Yeah, fitting into ecosystem, food chain, and stuff. But just being able to like logically make fit things to make sense, I think is just at least you don't have to spend so much.
A lot
time
of
on it.
these things we've been covering for the past bit has been like, you don't need to go in depth to have them, but you can just like have a little taste of it, like, oh, I'm gonna have this special plant that I make for this mission or something like that. Just like the small investment that you make in these small things, like, oh, there's this specific type of wildlife. It just does that much more to help the story and help the world and the immersion in it.
Yep. Okay, real quick, small note. Next thing is laws of physics and science. So how does your world in those regards differ from ours? Any notes there?
This is, again, I think, like an optional thing. You can literally just say, okay, physics just works the same way it does here.
Yeah.
And it's simple and easy, but if you want a story, that's has weird physics or has, like,
Yeah.
weird, like, chemical reactions between things you want to change from our natural world, then, yeah, this is something you need to plan out in
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah. I think do this if it serves a purpose in your story and it's cool.
If not, ignore
Yeah,
it.
most people don't. Like, I don't, like, build fantasy worlds, and I was like, most, it's very rare that, like, I'm trying to change there's, like, magic, obviously.
Yeah.
But, like, trying to change the, like, laws of, like, how gravity and all that kind of stuff works.
Thermodynamics.
Because this kind of impacts everything.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty big thing. But usually, if you're going to make a change to laws of physics or science, it's probably the base of that world.
Yeah.
You're probably building it because of this cool idea you had. So, anyway. Weather and climate we kind of talked about. Do you guys have any more notes on that?
I think when you keep in mind weather and climate, it can serve as a good idea for separating cultures based off like how they deal with the weather and climate that they are in, and like the natural disasters and things like that. And cultures can build up and survive by doing this and that. It's just another thing to keep in mind when you're making your world, to figure out like, okay, I want to have an area that's stormy all the time. What are the people like?
Yeah.
It's just nothing to help build your world and make it more real feeling.
In the Stormlight Archive, which is a book series by Brandon Sanderson, in a certain region, there's tons of storms all the time called high storms, like crazy wind and rain and sleet. And so everything is based off of these storms. The plant life, like everything is a crustacean. Everything has like a carapace, like all the animals and stuff, so they can hide in their shell when this comes. Plants also have like shells, and they retract their fronds and leaves and stuff to protect them from getting ripped out by the wind. So I thought that was really cool. Also, the humans, they build their cities like lodged into like on either side like mountains, so the mountains can buffer the wind and it doesn't like ruin their stuff. So like, you know what I mean? That's what you were talking about, basing the culture or things off of the weather. I think. Note on seasons. Are there seasons in your world? Any notes on seasons? Winter's coming, I think.
Let's say, well, in Hawaii, we don't really have a lot of experience with seasons.
We don't
at
actually
all.
know. I don't think seasons are real, in my opinion. I don't think winter's a real thing. Okay, getting on to...
Winter doesn't exist. Prove me wrong.
Change my mind. One of my last subtopics, cosmology. This is a strange one. Basically, what's above the people who live in this world?
Me.
Is it... I am God. Is it... Oh my gosh. What if you, like, are the GM and you make a world where there's not like a pantheon of fantasy gods or whatever. There's only one god. It's monotheistic, and the god is like literally like you. Like it's an ancient hero, but like he has your name. That'd actually be kind of cool. Okay, and dumb.
I was thinking, like, what if, like, you make the world, like, the play mat that you have, and they look up and they see the players and the DM around it?
People, like, the puppeteers who are controlling everything. And then a hero will be born, like, they inhabit that hero, and, like, that's why they have PCs. That's meta as hell. Okay.
Yeah.
But, like, is the sky above them? Are clouds above them? Stars? Clouds and stuff kind of have to do with weather. But, like, stars, moons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it important for your story to have, this planet far away that is the realm of this being or whatever?
I think a really obvious and good example is Tatooine. The only thing different cosmologically about Tatooine is it has 2 suns.
Yeah.
And it's a hot desert planet. So it makes sense that it's a hot desert planet because it has 2 suns. Yeah. I think that's a great example. I still don't know how they got that shot. Anyway, I think...
yeah, for things like that, like, having, weird star systems or, like, planets, and, you see often, like, you just have, like, a bit of, like, unique views that the players can imagine, and your readers can see.
And, basing people's, like, cultures or religions off of the sky as well. I think if you're delving into cosmology, make it cool, whatever, and then also, like, make the people of the world, like, base things off of it. Do the stars literally react to, like, tell you what fate is gonna do or whatever, so people have, like, learned to, like, read the stars? Like, that's all cool stuff. Or just, like, give your world, like, 3 moons, and, like, it's just cool, because that's fine also. It's just, like, it's because it's cool.
That's your tryptophobia, looking at the sky.
Oh, this is a good one. What does astronomy say about the creation of the world? And what does it say about the world's fate? I guess that's also kind of, the same thing. Like, is there a big, like, fiery scar in the sky because of a cataclysmic event or whatever that happened in the history? I think that's...
Yeah, it's a cool, like, canvas for designing cool things that happened in your history of the world and universe. You can have, like, all these cool things up in the sky.
Yeah. Okay, 5 more minutes. The final thing. I do want to talk about real quick. I'll probably close every world building episode with this. The #1 world building question. Whenever you make a change or addition to your world, you always want to ask yourself, how does this affect the other aspects of my world? So, I'm going to do a little exercise for you guys real quick, okay? So, I'm going to say, in my world that I'm creating, it rarely rains, okay? What are the next logical steps to that? You guys tell me. What does that affect?
Well, that'll affect definitely all of the settlements in the world and how they scrounge and scavenge for food and how they grow food, or if they grow food at all, or if they're nomads or not, or if they actually settle down, if they're going to be hunting. It affects the plant life. There's a whole lot of stuff that
It affects, like, every living thing in the world. It affects.
Yeah, if your living things depend on water.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but let's say, like, you do. They do for the sake of this. Yeah, like, humans now have to find alternative ways to get water. Water becomes a precious resource now.
Yeah, perhaps they delve deep into the ground to reach underground rivers and build civilizations around that.
They have to grow their stuff underground or whatever, where the water is. Yeah, but that's just kind of an example of it. You know what I mean? You're making a change, you're adding something to your world, and you have to think about the other ramifications to the rest of the world.
Yeah, action, reaction.
Otherwise, it becomes like the Elder Scrolls. No, I can't talk about the Elder Scrolls right now. All right. Before we close up, are there any final thoughts on what we talked about this time? My message to the world. Any?
I think the general theme of this topic that we've been talking about this whole episode, and having with so many of the different aspects and subjects we were talking about, is figure out what's important for the world that you're making and expand upon those things. You don't necessarily need to have a super developed, star system and a super developed flora system and fauna and all of this and different things. Figure out what's important for the story that you're trying to tell. Detail that.
Yeah. Zeke?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good idea to first really focus on the important aspects of your world in terms of really everything that we've covered today. And once you've got all of that down, you can then take the time to fill in the details and the little things that don't matter as much, but give life to your world. That way, you can start planning whatever it is that you're going to be doing. And as you're going along, you can say, oh, okay, maybe I like this idea and I like that, but it's not super huge to the story. You can just add it to the world whenever and wherever, and it doesn't impact things too heavily, but it gives it more life.
That's a good point. I think, real quick, I do want to note that we're kind of basing this series off of the natural progression of which you create things. So starting with the physical world, and then the next time we do a world-building episode is going to be on the history, and then like settlements and culture. Kind of the natural progression of how you want to build things in your world. And then within each one, right, we built our subtopics starting with what's your general theme. You want to figure that out first, and then your mapping and stuff. But saying that, I think starting your world off just with like an idea that you have and just building off of that, I think is also fine.
Yeah.
If you have an idea of like, this is like how you have really unique idea of like the racial tension, or like how the different races or whatever like interact with each other and stuff, and it's really cool. Base the world off of that. You don't totally have to go with the way that we're doing it.
Yeah. The order that we're doing it in right now is kind of like you set out to build a world and come up with ideas and things to fill the world and cultures and whatever. But if you're starting off with an idea for one specific culture that you really fell in love with, you can start with that and then build everything else around it.
Cool. Any other thing to say?
There's not really a wrong way to build a world, just a harder way.
Yeah, okay, true.
This is probably an easier way to do it, but like I've said, there's really no wrong way to do it. You can start out with anything you want and build it from there. This is just an easier way to do that.
Yeah, these are just like prompts and stuff to help you out in that. Also to help us. We're kind of doing these episodes to also help us when we world build. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's episode. This one was a lot of fun to do. Thank you guys for talking with me about this one. So next week is also going to be a cool episode that we totally haven't figured out yet. But the next world building episode will be on history. And so that one's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of cool discussion and stuff on that.
All right.
All right, thanks so much for listening.
Till next time.
Until next time.